Hey everybody, today I'm putting together some containers. They're going to be in some shade to part shade locations, and I thought this is the perfect opportunity for me to share with you some of my favorite plants for shade and some of the plants that I push into shade, even though maybe the tags don't say shade. So let me jump right in. I'm going to show you, these are 4 containers that are going to be going to AJ's Berry Farm in Lachine. So if you're out there this summer, you'll be able to see these pots in person and see how they're doing, and you can always report back if you loved them or didn't. And then I also have some other plants here behind me that I'm not including in these containers, but that I think would make good options and that I was considering for these pots as well. So let's jump right in with this one right in front of me. So right here in the center, I'm putting one of the easiest plants to take care of. It can take full sun, it can take full shade. It's a wax begonia. This one is the Surefire variety, but there are a lot of other ones. This one gets relatively large, but if you want large, you can also go with Dragonwing, Viking, Big. Those are all wax begonias that are similar. They have this nice thick leaf and they get very large. There are other varieties that are more compact, so you're going to want to pay attention to that because that's going to determine how it's going to fit in your container. These make great centers. The only downfall with these is a lot of times when the spent flowers fall off, they can fall on the like on your deck or on your sidewalk and leave a little bit of a stain, but they're really great if you put them in the landscape or you're putting them kind of farther out. We're also putting in another begonia. This is one called Vermilion Red, and this one has such a beautiful rose-like flower and nice dark rich green leaves, and this one gets quite big, and it's kind of in that tuberous begonia family, but it's much more branching and vigorous than some of the other ones like the nonstops and the selenias. It's similar though, so this is a really nice one. Even though they're a little bit different reds, I think they're going to look pretty nice together because this one's going to have the height. These are going to do a little bit more of a mounding action. Then to give us a little trailing action, I am putting in it's called First Kiss La Luna, and look at the beautiful flower on that and that nice dark foliage. Absolutely stunning plant, and it's going to get kind of a medium size, so it's going to come up, mound, and then trail over the edge, and the pointed leaves are an indicator that it probably does a little bit of trailing, so that's sometimes a clue with those. But look at the flower on that, just gorgeous. And then also it's put in here with some creeping Jenny or Lismachia, and this one is such an easy one to grow. This is another sun or shade. Actually, everything in here can take full sun or full shade, so this pot is very versatile. This is one though that it'll start trailing over the edge and it just keeps going and going. It's also mostly perennial in our area, so if you had some, you could stick it out in the yard and it would do very well. And it's kind of handy to have that trailing one over here because this particular pot did break over here, so by putting our trailing plant right there, it's going to hide it. The nice thing is these are pretty durable pots. This is going to be the 3rd year we're using them, and they are holding up really well, so we don't even mind this little missing spot because it's going to be hidden by all these plants. Let's move on to the other red and white one that we have. This is another Surefire begonia. This is the white, and just look at how pure white those flowers are, and then this beautiful rich green leaf. And this one gets a little bit more leaf coverage than some of the other Surefires, and it gets very, very large as the other ones do, but this one has a little bit more of a, I'm going to say more of a globe shape to it, very wide compared to some of the other ones. At least that's how I've noticed it grows. Absolutely stunning, gets quite large. Paired it with some impatiens. So these are New Guinea impatiens. This is just a red sun patient. Absolutely a perfect plant for those kind of, especially part shade locations. They do love the sun though, for the sun patients, but other New Guineas are more adapted to shadier spots, and also regular impatiens would fit in here too. I'm using these because they get a decent size and I want that fill coming on. And the tag does say sun to part shade. You could put a sun patient in full shade. Sometimes they don't flower quite as profusely and maybe don't get quite as big, but they can handle full shade, but they do best with some sun here and there. So it's a really great one, and they come in so many colors. That's the other thing about impatiens. Lots of reds, oranges, whites, pinks, and then mixes of the two. And then we also have a trailing begonia. So this is the Waterfall Encanto White, and you can see it has a little bit more of that kind of inverted tulip or bell-shaped flower, those pointy leaves. These get a nice size. They actually will start kind of growing these arms out, and the arms will arc over the edge. And then this is another Lismachia, and this one is Fancy Filler's Sunburst. So this one will just get these trailing arms that go over the edge and just fill out really nicely. Now on each of these, or most of these, I put in 7 plants, and I found that was a really good amount last year. They were still very, very full. If I took away 2 plants out of here, this would still be a very full container. And the measurement from the inside to inside is 19 inches across. So this is, I'm gonna call it a 19-inch pot. You have to be careful with the measurements that some companies give you, because sometimes they measure from the outside of the pot. And this would be a 21-inch pot if you measure from the outside, but I like to measure from the inside because I wanna know my space that I'm actually able to work with. I'm not so worried about this rim and what's in there. I wanna know how much space is in between. So I'm gonna call this a true 19-inch. In the center of this one, I have a main street. I think it's Chartres Street or Chartres Street. I'm not sure how to pronounce it exactly. I'm sure it's French. But this is a nice lime coleus. Coleus in general do really well in shade. This one can take full sun or full shade. You always want to check to see what tolerance it has, because not all of them work out the same. Some of them don't like full shade, some of them don't like full sun, but this one can handle either or. Have it paired with another foliage plant. This is Plectranthus, and the Plectranthus, this one's a variegated variety. This one gets actually quite large, so it takes a little while, but by the time we get to the, say, end of July, this thing is going to be climbing over the edge and probably trailing along the driveway if you're not keeping it in check. Fortunately, you can pinch it off or trim it as you like, and it does have a strong fragrance to it, and that fragrance does repel deer, and the oil on it is a little bit of a mosquito repellent as well. So if you kind of have it in a place where you walk and you touch it and stuff, that oil usually does do a little number on the mosquitoes to keep them down a little bit. Doesn't keep them completely away, but it can help. And then I have it paired with some Hot Plus lobelia, and this is the sky blue. Decided to go with that brighter color, just thought it would look really nice in there. We just trimmed all our lobelia, so don't have any blooming except for this one here. And this one here is the Techno Electric Purple or violet or something like that. I can't remember the color, but you can see the flowers on this. The Hot Plus has a little bit bigger flowers than this one, but both are really nice because they are going to trail over the edge, but they do get a little bit of a mounding action going. And the little delicate flowers, I think, are going to contrast nice with all this kind of thicker foliage. And then put it here with the Portofino Hot Coral begonia, and I don't have one blooming right now, but it has a very intense bloom. I had put some of the Portofino Citrix in their pots last year, and it was fantastic. They just did this nice kind of roll over the edge. The blooms are just beautiful. So this one I think is going to be just that little bit softer and just more foliage, but I think it's going to hold up really well. I was tempted to put another variegated variety in the center here, or something with some more color, and I might still change my mind because the other one I was thinking about was the Venice Boulevard, which is more of a lime with kind of red veining. Now that I think about it, I might, but I'm worried that it might clash a little bit with the hot coral. So I'm going to stay the course. Don't do this, Corey. You always do this. You second guess. We're going to go with it, and if I look at it in 2 weeks and don't like it, I can always swap it out, right? I probably won't, though. Anyway, now let's move on to this next one. In this one, I'm only putting 5 plants in here, and the primary reason is because I'm putting the Stonehenge begonia in here, and this is a wax begonia, has this beautiful bronze leaf. So that's another thing to look for in your wax begonias: bronze leaf versus green leaf. And then this is the, I think, rose color. Absolutely beautiful, and this one gets huge. It gets about, I think, at least 3 feet tall. So this one is going to fill out a lot. So I don't want to take a risk and really pack this one full, because I think this one could, you know, get really large. And I know that the other plants I have in here can hold their own. So this one here is the charged up Dragonheart Coleus, and this one isn't quite as big as the Main Street, or it's similar in size to the Main Street. I'm putting 2 of them in here. These Coleus can get very large, so I have to be a little careful with them, but I had put them in their pots last year and they were absolutely fantastic. And this one, I just think that the pink kind of brings out some of the color that we have in that begonia. And I'm pairing it here with the Impatient. It's a New Guinea Impatient, and this series is called Spectra. And I'm just trying the Spectra because it seems like the Spectra have a little bit more of a bushier kind of habit compared to the Sun Patients. So here's the white as well, and I think you're starting to see a little bit of how its habit is only slightly different. They're very, very similar, but look at how bright that white would be. If you had a shady spot, this would definitely get the job done. And the Spectra series are labeled sun to full shade, so these can handle just about anything you throw at them. So can this wax begonia, so can this coleus. So this one, extremely versatile. In fact, I think all the ones that I've shown you so far are sun or shade, except when I'm talking about lobelia, and that's something I missed there. Lobelia, really, when we look at the tag, it says sun to part shade. So in a really shady location, you're not going to get flowers off it. It might stretch a little bit. So you're going to want to make sure it gets at least a little bit of sun. Even if it's just morning sun or evening sun, your lobelia is going to look a little better. But lobelia can handle quite a bit of shade. So that part shade is going to be just fine. And I define part shade as usually in that 3 to 6 hour type thing. If it's part shade, it does not tolerate that hot afternoon sun. If it's part sun, that means those 3 hours or 6 hours of sun that it gets can be in direct full sun. So always good to play it safe with a part shade plant by making sure that between, say, noon and 2 or somewhere around there, whatever your hottest period is, that you're not letting these plants get out there in the sun. Now I have some other plants over here that I'm going to show you. I think when you look at this lineup, you realize that you can get a lot of color in shady spots. I'm going to start with some plants that really shouldn't do well in like a part shade area, but they tend to. So that's going to be like geraniums. Geraniums usually are listed full sun, sometimes part sun, but this exact geranium, the Caldera Red, I had in a part shade area. It only got indirect light. It never actually got full sun at any point during the day. Got good indirect light though, so that's kind of important with them. And this thing bloomed all season long, and I was actually absolutely thrilled with it. And the Caldera is one of those, it's more of a single flower, and it's a little bit more self-cleaning because the petals will fall off on their own, and then these little stems or bracts or whatever they are, those will just be left, and then those will fall off, and then eventually the stem falls off. So you don't notice the spent flowers on this one hardly at all, and that's one of the advantages, that single flower. And it's still very, very nice. It gets kind of a little bit more of a lacy curtain versus kind of more of your tighter blooms on this one. And remember, these are young plants still, so the flower umbels are a little bit smaller than normal. This is a really interesting one called Brocade Fire Night, and this one is the salmon, or no, it's not brocade, it's Brocade Salmon Night. Fire Night is the orange one. But what I love about this are the leaves. So it has that nice kind of bullseye kind of look in the leaf where it's that lighter color on the outside, dark on the inside. Really nice to have that foliage contrast going on, because when you have that shady spot, any contrast is going to really stand out. Also put this one in here. I think this is it the Dynamo? No, it's the Fantasia Orange. And both the Dynamo Orange and the Fantasia Orange are really true oranges. A lot of times when a geranium says it's orange, it's really a very red orange. These, I mean, I would definitely say that this is orange, which is very, very nice and kind of a nice thing to have if you really are looking for orange. Next plant I'm going to talk about is Euphorbia. And Euphorbia, on the tag, it says full sun to part sun. This one I put in full shade as well, and it just does its thing. Now you have to be careful if you put it with vigorous plants in a shady spot, because it might get really masked out and it won't get enough indirect sun, or it can sometimes get swallowed up. So there are larger varieties of Euphorbia as well, but ultimately I found that, you know, it gets about this big if it's happy. So, and it's happy in most conditions. This is a very easy plant to deal with. It doesn't fuss really, so we love that. Another super easy one, this is a Mizu, or a trailing Dorianthus. Gets a little tiny red flower, kind of insignificant flower, but it's more of a succulent, gets this great trailing action. So this is just one of the arms. We're going to start seeing more coming off of this. This one can take full sun, full shade. You can avoid watering it for a very long time and it will not curse you. It will just kind of hang out for a while, and then when you give it water, it'll just thank you by just looking good. It just seems to work, you know, so it's a nice plant for that. Another one, but this one definitely is more of a part shade to shade. It does not like full sun, and this is a Tradescantia. It's called Pistachio White, and beautiful variegation in it. So you have that nice green leaf with that white stripe in there. This is such a beautiful plant. I have grown it in full sun, but it tends to get really brown around the edges if you do that. So it's not a good one for full sun. I had it in, yeah, it was definitely a part shade. You know, it just doesn't like that direct afternoon sun. Otherwise it does really well. I've had better luck. This is the regular Tradescantia. This one's a little wimpy. It'll fill out a lot over the next couple weeks, but it's more of a purple variety. And this one here, I've grown in full sun. It does like a little bit of a break from it. So if you have it with other plants, that will give it just a little bit of protection. It will just keep producing. It kind of covers your pot. It just trails down. Super easy one. And it also will sometimes weave its way into other plants. super easy to grow, so love that. Sweet potato vine's another one that people underestimate it. Now, when I look at tags, this one here says sun to part shade, so this is the Sidekick Bronze. Really like the color on this, and it changes a little bit over time. So the new growth is going to always be lime, then it starts getting its more of that bronzy color. Although at certain points in the season, these almost turn a shimmery gold color as well. So it just kind of depends on the time of year, but they always have, you know, a similar kind of color range that you see here. Very, very nice. Meanwhile, when we look at this one here, this is the Sweetheart, or Sweet Caroline Sweetheart Lime. This one here, it's gonna say full to part sun. We put this one all the time in part shade. It does just fine. Full shade, they do okay, but I'd say it does want a little bit more sun. Also comes in the jet black, and the jet black is really beautiful. I have found that the Sweet Caroline version is one of the darker ones. There are other ones out there. Sometimes they're a little more purple. Sometimes they're just a little less of that kind of darkness going on. And there are variegated varieties, all kinds of different choices with that. What else can I show you? So lamium is another one, and this is just a lamium that it's a perennial in our area. This is one that we wintered over just in this pot. We did have it in a greenhouse, so it was protected. If you have yours in a pot or container, you're gonna wanna make sure that it's in a little bit of a protected spot so it doesn't get too cold, because I think it's, wait, what am I saying? It's hard to do -30. So unless you get down to -30, this lamium is gonna be just fine. It's also known as dead nettle. It comes in a couple different colors as well. So sometimes the flowers are pink or white or maybe a little purple. The leaves can be, sometimes go from lime, or they can be like this one here is a little bit more of a silver. And this is a good trailing plant, and this one can take part shade to full shade as well. So a nice reliable one. The flowers I find on this one, it doesn't bloom all season, but the foliage is beautiful all season. So it's a good choice. Have some more begonias here. So this one here is the fire begonia, but there is variation between the different plants. It's going to be in the same color scheme, but you might not have blooms that are all identical, but they will all work together. So that's an interesting one as well. Also over here, this one here is the Nonstop Yellow. The Nonstop and the Selenia tuberous begonias are absolutely stunning. They get quite large, nice and full, and huge flowers on them. And I do find like this yellow Nonstop, the yellow is really, really intense and saturated. Some of the other ones might be a little paler, so it kind of depends on your preference, but really love this one. This one here is the Glory Pink. So another one, nice double flower on it. The flower on this one is a little bit smaller, but it tends to fill out quite a bit. And this one too gets nice and large. So it's a great plant. The other one I have in here is the Griffin begonia. So this one doesn't get any, or it might get flowers, but they're kind of insignificant flowers. So this one gets very large as well. So you have to keep in mind when you're looking at, especially your begonias, you want to make sure that they are definitely the size that you're looking for, because sometimes a small begonia kind of gets lost in your containers. Otherwise, some of the big ones can really overtake. When it comes to watering, shade usually means you don't need to water very often. These plants aren't taking up as much water as your sun varieties, and some of these plants really do prefer to dry down. So when I'm dealing with geraniums or begonias, I like to let them get really quite dry before I water them again. The ones that I'm gonna have a little bit more concern with, I don't want my lobelia to dry out. I don't want my coleus to dry out. I don't want my sweet potato vine to dry out. A lot of these other ones, even impatiens, they can dry out and they might be all wilted, and you just add water and they come back. That's pushing them. If you keep doing it, they might get a little weak, but they can usually make it through and look really good. So much more forgiving as far as the water situation with a lot of these shade plants as well. So again, watch out for your lobelia, your sweet potato vine, your coleus as far as your watering. Those are the ones, they don't want to be wet all the time. And that's the other thing with shade, because they're not taking up as much water, you do want to check them. So don't just water them like you water all your plants. So, you know, if you water every morning, your shade ones might only need to be watered once or twice a week. So you need to check it. A lot of times you can just stick your finger in there and just say, oh, it's still pretty damp in there, so I think it's going to be just fine. If it's a basket, you can lift it and go, oh, it's not light yet, so we're gonna just wait. So please be really careful about not overwatering these shade containers. And then usually to the euphorbia, if you stress it out with not enough water, it does lose its leaves. It doesn't usually die, but it will kind of look a little rougher for a little while. I've never dried out a Tradescantia, so I never tested that one. What else didn't I see here? For the most part, I'm just trying to see if there's any other things that I need to make sure and tell you. Not so much. Otherwise, I mean, you have a lot of options, and do think about foliage when you're thinking about your shade, because you have a lot of options, especially when you're looking at all the different kinds of coleus that are out there. There are some very, very bright ones, really intense colors. I think I've unloaded what I can think of with my experience with shade. I've had very good luck with them. I love working on these pots for AJs because they kind of let me do whatever I want. And last year we went with a lot more oranges and yellows. So this year we're going more of the warmer reds and cooler pinks kind of thing. So we're just trying something a little different. It's kind of fun to be able to do that. And I will note that your location could play a role in what plants are going to do well. I'm above the 45th parallel, so my sunlight tends to be a little less intense than people who are farther south. So there might be plants that I can push that are more shade plants that, you know, I can push them into more sunny locations, and in some of the warmer, hotter areas you might not be able to pull that off. So ask at your local greenhouse or nursery which plants they suggest for full shade. Shade plants are becoming more plentiful, or more plants that can do full sun, full shade, and it's made it much easier for people. You know, another plant I forgot to put in here was the Torrenia. That is a nice trailing plant with nice flowers on it too. I forgot about that one. There's more too. So what other plants do you recommend? Because that's another thing. I might be totally missing out on an opportunity here. So if you have plants that either you love for shade and they're intended for shade, or if there's a plant that maybe you have pushed into the shade and it's held up really well. Fuchsia's another one. That one does really well in shade too. Oh my gosh, I gotta make a list. Sorry, this is definitely not a complete list for you guys, okay?